big slurp. So the other day, the legend Jimmy Hunt put out that he wanted to talk to like New Zealand psychologists and stuff like that, and then I was like, I'd like to talk to some New Zealand psychologists, but I'd like to expand that out to be science educators in New Zealand. I'd like a David Sinclair of New Zealand, a Lex Friedman of New Zealand, Andrew Human of New Zealand.
Oh, I saw that post.
Yeah, so that's when I like went back through my catalogue. I was like, well, who have I spoken with that's like sciencey, educaty, and of course you two were in there. Luke's been in there 3 times, and I was like, right, these two now are the what is it? Is it the Rob Wolf and his wife of the world, or are we more like a Gabby Reese sort of what's this? Laird Hamilton vibe?
I'll let you answer that.
Luke's gonna take the floor.
I don't know which one.
You like turmeric though, eh? So
yeah,
and you surf.
Laird superfoods, why not?
Yeah, I must admit, when I've been doing a lot of the reading and things, and you hear about these partners that are involved, with either the health or the tech space or whatever entrepreneurial kind of area. I keep saying to Luke, like, they're still not us. They're still different. Like I just feel like sometimes people either come from like either sporting background or got really fortunate being involved with an entrepreneurial activity quite young, and they don't necessarily have like real deep science backgrounds.
Yes, I think
some of them
like
do. Don't get me wrong.
Rob Wolf's kind of biochemistry, and his wife's CrossFit. Laird is obviously big wave surfing, and Gabby's volleyball. Yeah, and then they're like, I guess their main product is their pool training and stuff like that, and then they've branched out into, I guess, affiliate products like superfood. Same with the Wolves, like they got Element for electrolytes, podcasting, books. Yeah.
Well, they all got their own groove, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
We're just, Luke and Rach.
Luke and Rach. The hub, tailored hub. Which of course is not just you two. Who else have you guys got there at the hub there? Is that Clarence Street?
Tristram
Street.
Good old Tristram.
Yeah. So who else you got there?
So we've got a team of 16 people now. So everything that covers mindset, lifestyle, nutrition and movement.
Nice.
Yeah. So as part of that, we have health coaches, life coaches, trauma specialists, kind of the mindset element, come into lifestyle, a little bit kind of overflow into there as well. Then we got your nutritionist, your clinical nutrition, community movement specialists, your massage therapy, a clinical exercise physiologist. We've got a full battery of people to kind of wrap around and support people depending on where they need it.
Nice. What attracts you to the place, Rachel?
Well, I mean, this is the genesis, right? So where I met Luke. So fast forwarding or rewinding, sorry, a bit. I met Luke in a retreat. It was like a leaders retreat. It went down to Queenstown, and then obviously got to know him as a friend, among many other great new friends from that particular leadership retreat. And it wasn't until I got the chief product officer role, and I was like, I need to be a total weapon at what I do. I need to just build world-class products, work with some incredible individuals at that particular company. And I came to Luke and I was like, I've negotiated a health stipend as a part of the package, and this is the stipend. Can you make me the best version of myself? And what does that look like? And so that's where, I guess as a part of Luke's very science-backed holistic kind of approach, started to really feed into how do we take the best of, human performance and break it down into small steps and get you there. And so I guess the hub has always been about the 4-pillar health philosophy. So you've always had that vision, but then it was really like, how do you take that into the executive space? It's no longer just athletes or sports people generally. It's actually how do you bring performance into the cognitive space, the endurance and stamina around stress levels with new projects, big multinational deals. Like, how do you take it to a whole new level and bring a whole new level of leadership and capacity to lead, which is really what the hub then turned into And then we have lots of other plans there too around educational kitchens and, breathing more into the 4-pillar health philosophy. So it's no longer just sort of this traditional gym space, which always feels very heavy and transactional, into a more like, how do you lift yourself on a bar? Like, how do you push? How do you pull? How do you figure out how to navigate your life? Because you want to be able to, pick up your child or run around and play Tickle Monster with them or whatever it is. And how do you actually bring that to a lifestyle rather than just fit for gym? It's fit for life. So that's been an interesting journey, but that's sort of how that progression actually unfolded.
So was Rachel your first client that came to you with like a design phase for what does me look like as high performance individual executive?
So I've dealt with many executives over the time, but not any that really wanted to create the process with me. Generally, they come to me with very little understanding of what they need, or a background in biochemistry and understand all the unique constructs, I guess. So she could help me deconstruct it and understand what is actually needed from her standpoint as well. So it became quite a unique partnership from that standpoint as well. So just kind of really teasing out the finer detail, I guess.
So how do we flip the clickbait 6-week program to the individual stepping stone designed personal lifetime health?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say real health is slow health. And I was just like everyone else, where you think, if I just kick my ass in the gym for 12 weeks, or if I just start to meditate for 30 days, my life will change. It's just not how life is, right? And I think a lot of the paradigms I had around health and what that means to me and how I'd gotten myself to that point, I had to really unbecome and unwind. And it started with how I was thinking and how I was talking to myself. So it wasn't until I really started to see the language I used to myself in the mirror, or around how much anxiety I created with these stories. And my brain's great at telling stories. I mean, Luke's like, your brain's made to be a storyteller around just things that weren't real, right? There's this wonderful quote that says something like, I have gone through some of the world on my life, saw people's worst lives, like worst situations, worst kind of losses, grief, whatever, and 90% of it all just happened in my head. And I was just like, wow. So there's these types of things where it's just like, how much are you actually eroding yourself because of those self-talk sort of narrative elements? And what language are you using? So I've been a big fan of language. As I've kind of progressed in my product development space, is how do we imbue and embody language in products that we build and craft? And equally, if we are a product, if we are our ultimate product,
individual,
as an individual, as a person, if we are the most magnificent product we will ever build, which is actually very true, right? Because we are made, not born necessarily. Of course, everyone's born, but then it really comes to, what is the story you're telling? What is the narrative? What are the words you're using? And when you're saying things like, you're not enough, you will never be understood, you are wrong, all these types of things that you just keep hammering yourself with in the narrative, you become that product. And so I think, as much as I'd love to be able to deconstruct a life worth living and the health worth fighting for in 6 weeks, you can build a model, and the principles are the thing that then breathes into the outcome. But it first starts with the mindset and the behaviors and the narratives and the habits. And that's why I really, I guess, fell in love with the 4-pillar health philosophy, because it was the first time there was language around the steps to true long health. And to navigate that mindset and lifestyle element was just critical to the whole movement and nutrition space.
Because we know everyone that comes in, what they want to do, go to the gym and just literally smash themselves. It's just a continuous stream of self-harm, I guess.
It is self-harm. It is. Yeah.
Flatulence.
Yeah. It was just like, we don't know what to do. We'll just put ourselves into the hole further and further, and then it's just so much harder to climb out because just keep digging deeper and deeper. So it's really stripping back the constructs of society, because that's how it's taught us. That's what we need to do to be healthy. We need to have a calorie deficit, and we need to just drive ourselves into the ground and just run.
Six-pack abs.
Yeah, six-pack abs,
yeah. 12.
Yeah, why not 12?
Whatever, why not?
Whatever's the latest and greatest.
Yeah. I've been started following this girl. She's a Kiwi in Australia. She's been to the CrossFit Games. She's called CrossFit Kate. She has quite a varied way of looking at the world. And there's the meme out there with the guy with sunglasses holding up the science. And one of her, she's adopted it. She's an Instagram person, does online programming. And one of her things was stop jumping programs. Like programming is amazing, but no bloody good if you're doing, I don't like that one day I want to flog myself again, so I'll steal that program and I'll flog myself again, and then I'll go, there's a flog myself program, or vice versa. You just sit in the middle, I don't want to do any of these. You've just got an array of programs.
Well, I think the other big thing is there's so many organisations out there at the moment that are just the one all fits program. It's like, here you go, here's a blanket program that should apply to everybody. Like, it's just from movement to nutrition to even mindset elements. The biggest thing that we do at Tailored, it's in the name. It's we tailor it to the individual, because
thanks, Mum and Dad.
Yeah, you got to use what you got. Because too often people are just trying to take this shotgun approach, and this should work. But the thing that we've learned over the last decade of being in this industry with Tailored is everyone is uniquely different, and we all have different physiology, biochemistry, genetics, and these are things we need to account for. And then on top of all that, those foundational pillars, we have the lifestyle elements. How do we actually live our life? There's so many elements which are just neglected, and you can do this.
So what's fostering the community, the buy-in? This is as we've just said, this is a mind shift. This is a paradigm. What are you finding is working so far? Not to give away the special sauce.
Well, I suppose the key thing is it's stripping back the constructs and building community around that, around challenging the status quo and actually looking at first principles. Too often we're clouding the water with too much of the outcome measures, not actually looking at first principles. What is actually going to work for me as an individual? So, and then creating a community around that is willing to learn, to fail and learn and understand, I guess, is that what we'd like to call bio-curious. So they're curious about their biology. Because I think too often people are just looking for that answer. It's not going to come very quickly, because even with diagnostics, you've got 8-week turnaround until you're kind of starting to get the results from diagnostics. Then you need to start applying those sort of things. And then even with the diagnostics, you can start to get into this route of creating issues that are not issues. So there's elements of that too. So what we're trying to teach people is to become bio-curious and just understand their own unique biochemistry and biology. So, and it's creating that community around that, because it's all about building that tribe or that community that will help influence that.
You said about language, and you're both wearing Oura rings. You can start gaming, going to sleep.
Yeah.
Or you can be really upset and ruin your day because my Oura rings had a bad sleep.
Well, it starts even with our children. So both our children have Oura rings. So the entire family have Oura rings. My daughter's got one all the time. I've got a black one. I digress. They didn't come out with it later. But anyway, but what's really beautiful about that, and I think the key phrase is not only bio-curious, but also having body literacy. Because we aren't taught at school, really. We have human biology, but it's the ones and zeros of bio. What does your body do fundamentally in a vacuum? How should it function in a vacuum? But then it's we're not lab rats or other things where you can control an environment so tightly that it functions like ones and zeros and this perfect little ecosystem. And so we're even with our children, while they have the Oura ring and while there's a conversation around, how did you sleep? And they immediately go to the Oura, which we do, and say, I got an 85 or a 92. We really instill in them, how do you feel? Right? And then talk them through, did you wake up a lot? Were you dreaming a lot? and it's just trying to give them the real, the moment to sort of sit and think, yeah, how did I sleep? How am I feeling? Am I tired? Am I cranky? Do I feel energetic? But it's just actually getting them to check in on themselves, which we don't really get taught. And we have great books here as well about how does my heart feel? And it literally goes through different states of how you're feeling and what the color is, and if it's prickly, if it's smooth, like where do you feel it? And so my daughter, who's wonderful, but compared to my son, she probably doesn't quite have as much of an EQ chip. She might come back to me in 10 years' time and say, Mum, come on, please. But, we're working on that because, of course, everyone's different. But it's been really powerful for her to sit down and us go through the book. And because she likes to run away from conflict and emotion because she doesn't know how to handle it, which I actually think might mean that she's even more hyper-intuitive to EQ, but she doesn't know how to navigate it. We can actually talk through okay, we work through those items, and then we say, like, what's an example of what happened with your brother yesterday? Like, how did you feel? Which page is this? And then even generally speaking, I can say to her, when we think about the book, where are you at right now? And she'll be like, oh, my heart feels really heavy and it's green and a little bit prickly. And so we can actually give that literacy to it. Again, language, checking in. And to your point before, I think what's changing the market, which is the timing's right, where there's become more of a mass ascension around there must be more than all of this CrossFit, F45, BFT, all this stuff. Like, there's more to life than just those numbers. And I can hurt myself, injure myself, but it doesn't change my outcome. Like, I just end up feeling old and tired. And so we're seeing a lot more holistic approaches these days, a lot more conversations around holistic psychology, talking about trauma and trauma bonds and, mapping and all this kind of stuff. And so the language is starting to catch up with this concept that many leaders in the space have been harping on about for years. But we're finally getting to the point where the society is like, I'm sick of the old way. I just want to feel better. And what does it look like? And so getting more people coming to us because they genuinely want something different and they want lifelong health. And what does that look like? Those are the people that are starting to wake up and come to us at Tailored.
Because the other thing to go with that as well is those that are, pursuing those other options, they're not helping themselves in any way. They actually put themselves further in the hole. They're aging quicker, the injuries are slowing them down, and it's just making it that much harder to come back. And so what we're seeing time and time again, and particularly with COVID is another great example, is the post-COVID burnout. Like, business owners and leaders in general, they worked so hard through last year and trying to keep the business afloat, and then the adaptation to it afterwards as well, as we dealt with the new normal, and then dropping back into it just now. The execs and the business owners that we deal with, they're really struggling right now, and they were struggling before this. So right now is a really crucial point that is going to cause a whole bunch of distress, really. So it's going to be an interesting space to see how many people start to adapt this, because if they don't adapt it, they're just going to keep going down this hole, because what worked for them previously is not going to work for them going forward, because we're just in this inundated society where it's overload. We've got technology that is continuously giving us notifications. We've got EMFs surrounding us. There's so many environmental things that we can no longer escape, from work to family to lifestyle, that people need to start to address. Otherwise, they're just going to be climbing down this hole that we need to pull them back out of, and it's just harder and harder the longer they leave it. So it's an interesting duality, and one thing that I think we're trying to do really well is it's the marriage between the subjective and the objective, so the qualitative and quantitative, so bringing those two together, because they shouldn't be separate, they should be together, because you often get the scientists that focus on the quantitative, and then the people that the psychologists that may be more on the subjective, using the language, but we're trying to marry those two together. So it's that duality.
Bioaugmentation, right?
Yeah.
It's the beautiful symphony between the ones and zeros, the data, and the anthropology.
Back to Jimmy Hunt, which is where I started. He released a podcast with another great science educator in this country, Professor Grant Schofield, yesterday, and they went into the psychology and the biology, and it's a really fantastic that Grant sort of thinks it's more the GABA glutamate rather than what we've been focusing on with the serotonin. And he lays out a very good argument, and I don't know what it's come from, whether it's just that I look at a pupil all day and look at accommodation all day, or my background in my undergraduate looking at neuroscience and thinking, man, the autonomic nervous system's amazing. But that just spoke to me, and that's where my bias comes in, that speaks to me. But you brought up a good point there, Rachel, that it's what does better look like. And also with you said people are going down the slope and continuing down the hole, and you're trying to climb them back out again. If we're outcomes focused, then we're never there. And the further we are away from our outcome, then the more disheartened we get. But if we can focus on what is better, what can we do better, then that's going to get us out of the hole, and then hopefully give us a little bit more resilience and a little bit more buffer to this over stress or times of stress.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why we're leading into the behavioural psychology elements of it, where we're doing nudging. So we're not about big transformational change. And it's about how can we get a quick win on the cards ASAP. So really looking in, what's the MVP that we can really get you to that.
So what's MVP in this context?
So MVP in this context is minimal viable. I suppose it's
minimal viable product type thing.
Yeah, in this case, product or performance or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking most valuable player. Sorry.
Why not too?
We'll go MPVW. Minimal viable win, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's really just trying to give them a win on the books as soon as possible, but also what we do in our 4-pillar philosophy is identify what is the pillar that they need to address first and foremost. Obviously, there's a sequence in what we need to focus on: mindset, lifestyle, nutrition, then movement. But within that, they're going to have deficiencies. So where do we start first? So it could be a simple thing like starting the morning with a glass of water. Like that, so many people are not drinking water these days, and it's just such a powerful way to really enhance your system. Like, it's really bringing people back to the foundational elements of health. And this is the hardest thing I find is so many people are so disconnected with the basics. And they just think of it as the basics, and they just want all the biotech, the clinical diagnostics. They want all the high-level biohacking stuff, but they're not doing the foundations first. Like, you can't do that without the foundations. You need to drink water. You need to move. You need to chew. It's just
sleep.
And sleep. And to sleep. Yeah, that's the key word I forgot.
That's one of your favourites.
Yeah, sleep is definitely one of my favourites. But yeah, so it's like people are bored by the basics, focusing on the high level stuff without the foundation. So you're building on a platform that is off unstable foundations.
Well, you're also looking at society norms, right? Yeah. People are rewarded, and this is where the self-harm comes from. There are a variety of self-harm behaviours that are actually rewarded by society. It's the late nights, it's the no sleep, it's the getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to work out. It's the deadline, it's the 8 o'clock meeting, it's the working right until you go to bed. The reality is there needs to be a shift in what does societal norms actually do to either improve people's health or continue to erode it. And again, there is slowly an improvement in these conversations and more people really questioning, like, is that something to be celebrating? Like, just because you pulled an all-nighter or this is a norm for you does not mean you should be wearing a badge. Like, that's actually really erosive and creates also a cultural disparity at workplace to say that's okay and that's normal. Which again puts more people into the hole and impacts things like productivity and all that kind of good stuff. But it's just interesting to have these conversations, because even some of the business owners we speak with, and we're very selective about who we work with, and for the most part we can see when people are ready, when they're not. And when they're not, we don't try to force it, because something else needs to change. But there, for example, were 2 business owners, very high performing people, and they're sharing with me some of their challenges. Their husband and wife team, they're having gut issues. They're seeing regression of muscle tissue. They're weaker, etc., etc. And I spoke them through, like, what does your lifestyle look like? Tell me about what you're actually doing. What does your day look like? And long story short, it got to the point where I was really frank with them. I said, unless something changes in your lifestyle, nothing that you do to implement new healthy practices will stick.
Mm.
Because you're still having late nights, you're still going to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. You know, you're still working so hard, and you're from 9 to 5, not taking a break, and you're saying that's okay. Like, something needs to change there. And, you know, you've got this habit of a bottle of wine every night to wind down because that's your crutch. And it's okay. You know, relationships with alcohol are important to acknowledge. Mm. That thing in your life that is a crutch, like alcohol, wine, whatever it might be, exists because it's helping you cope. It's your coping mechanism, and you've got a relationship with that coping mechanism. And so people say, oh, I can't stop drinking. It's just like, yeah, because it's a relationship you've had in your life for like 5 years. You can't split up from wine and not be really upset, especially when it's so easy to just come back and pour yourself another glass. And so I said to this couple, which are incredible people, but it's like until you start to really assess your life and what's important to you, then no amount of work that we can do with you will actually make a change or make a difference. And that really like shook them up. They're like, actually, you're really, really right. Where is my life going? Where do we want to be in 5 years? If we want all the stuff and health, like we have to choose one. Mm-hmm. You can't have it all.
Mm. And this is where another critical line in the sand comes. So often we tell these people these things, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's a full overhaul. We're stripping everything back. We're going to be perfect. And that's just not going to achieve anything. Like, because again, you're going through the outcomes focused approach, so it's really putting the brakes on them and teaching them to slow down and let's just pick one thing. So it comes back to that behavioral nudging, you know, that quick win. So if we're going to focus on one thing, what's the one thing that's going to have the biggest impact for this individual? Obviously getting to sleep on time. Like, there's nothing more, like from a performance standpoint, there's nothing more powerful than sleep. So let's and health obviously as well. So we need to be getting them to sleep. So let's not necessarily get the perfect sleep time, but let's start winding that back to a more reasonable time. And understanding, you know, the physiology around that. You know, for example, we know at 11 o'clock we're going to get a dose of adrenaline. So let's maybe not let them get that second wind. Let's try and get it just before that 11 o'clock, which is still not an ideal bedtime in my eyes, but if we can get them into sleep before 11 o'clock, they're not going to get that hit of adrenaline. They're not going to get that second wind. They're not going to feel like they can keep working. Instead, they'll be tired. They'll go to sleep. But then again, people think that sleep is a off switch, which it really isn't.
Oh, I thought that for years.
Yeah.
Like, surely if I just, you know, find a way to just calm down enough, my sleep switch will just go off and I'll be out. No.
Yeah. What they don't realize is you should be doing the right things in the morning. So it all starts with a good morning routine. So that's when sleep starts in my eyes. Like, that's how you set up yourself for success, is in the morning. So a good evening routine starts in the morning.
Bizarre.
Yeah, no, I love this. You guys, you threw me with the MVP there, and I was not on the same page with you. and like you said as well, like language, and you're talking about us being the product. Why have you done that? I'm thinking sort of design thinking, like sort of navigating all the ideas on the floor, and they're like, what's the small, small gains that we can make? Like, why product? Why are we thinking it as a product?
I think it's because at the end of the day, everything that we think, do, input in or around ourselves forms who we are. Right? So we talk about, we think a lot of my language around product is a lot more broad than many others would suggest. At the end of the day, whatever we put out to the world, right, whether it's the way we present ourselves to our peers or our partner or whatever, is a product of what you've been doing, thinking, eating, living, moving, all that kind of stuff, right? So we are a byproduct of that. And, what we've realized is there are a couple of key ingredients required to take yourself on a long journey to a great product, or even products every day, what you are every single day. And a part of that is having faith in a process. And I can speak to that just as an example. So I tried so many, before I met Luke and Taylor, I tried so many online apps, like different workout apps, settled on Sweat for a long time. Take it as you will, but the decision I made on Sweat, there are many apps much better than that, but they're doing an amazing job, don't get me wrong, is I said, I'm going to just have absolute blind faith in this app and these designers for at least 12 weeks. Like, I'm not even going to think about not showing up. I'm going to say, right, these guys must be onto something. They have obviously got this great app and a whole community that comes together. And for 12 weeks, I did it. And there were times I had to I had to force myself to literally roll out of bed to the point where you literally roll and then fall out, because just trying to get out, and have my workout gear right by in my bed, and just literally go on autopilot and say, this is my routine, this is my thing for 12 weeks. And guess what happened? I got results. Like, I got stronger, I got fitter, I felt better about myself, and in the process of trusting the process, trusting every day, showing up for my health, not for anybody else but myself, actually worked. And when we think about what we do at Tailored, even what we're doing with Tailored Technology specifically, is we're working to deconstruct this highly complex system of biodata and behavioral psychology, and starting to build a system or a process and an interface, an app, that will tell you daily nudges, will give you daily nudges. All you got to do is have faith in the system, because we've all done all the hard work in the background, right? All the science, all the deep tech, etc., etc. What do I do today, at a minimum, to show up for myself? And we often talk about, like, your best today isn't the same as your best tomorrow, but do something that's better. And so if we can kind of create these small little wins, these small little nudges every day, and give people a reason to have faith in the system, then you will see results. But again, it takes that trust and the faith in the process.
But it also comes back to, what are the results you're seeking as well? So coming into it, Rach did really well in the Sweat app. She got fit, she got strong, she lost weight, but at what cost as well? So the big part she's missing here is, that led into some chronic fatigue and burnout.
I really do. Yeah.
Because she wasn't just layering on this movement, she was working like a dog. Like, she was going through a very stressful transition period into a new role, which launched into COVID. Like, you started, your first day was in the start of COVID, the first week of COVID, I believe.
Lockdown, yeah. March 31st, is it? Or
27th, whatever it was last year. In her new role. So, like, this is where we need to really have smart goal setting and understand what they're actually trying to achieve and what they want in the long term, not the short term. Because obviously, who doesn't want to be stronger, less weight, and
better composition.
Better composition. So like, that's great, but at what cost?
Yeah,
it's like trying to get a six pack at the cost of your overall enjoyment of life, your libido, your enjoyment of just food in general, energy levels. The amount of people that pursue the six pack at the cost of their health is ridiculous.
Or enjoy.
Yeah.
And so to give more colour to that, I mean, I'd been doing that for about 3 months in the end before I hit that kind of screeching halt on that new role when that started. But what was interesting is I kept trying to do the same thing, and that's where the distinction is I kept trying to do the same thing, waking up at 5 o'clock every morning, every second day doing a 5k run, alternate day it would be the app. And I kept trying to do that, even though the stress and my lifestyle had changed so dramatically. I still tried to claw a hold of this thing, because it was my coping mechanism too. And so what was very interesting, what ended up happening, is I ended up getting injured. So I overused my shoulder. I get injured, impingement, or something like that. Yeah. And so I suddenly had to stop, because my hip was causing me problems, my shoulder was causing me problems. I was starting to kind of break down. The exercise regime I'd started was my coping mechanism. So there was a whole psychological, what am I going to do? I've got all the stress. I'm trying to navigate this as healthily as I can. And it really required a lot of faith. And I had lucky to have, one of the best performance coaches in at least the Southern Hemisphere right in front of me and living with me. And so he was able to take it back and say, you need to start walking, which, oh my gosh, I've got a great video we often share to some of our high performers with me in a camera saying they're telling me to walk I can't deal. Like, this is not my coping strategy. I'm not okay with this. I'm incredibly uncomfortable and frustrated because I don't want to just flip and walk. And so, but there was a wonderful quote, I can't remember who it was from, but basically they said, whatever you're resisting the most is probably what you need the most right in that moment in time. But, you know, that you can use that to your to detriment as well. But in that case, walking and taking it slow and changing my behaviour to adapt to my lifestyle and the new stresses was actually the most important part. To your point that when you say yes to some things, you say no to others. And if you're trying to get that six-pack or lose 10 kilos, what are you saying no to as a result? Are you saying no to that awesome date night, you know, dinner where you get to splurge and enjoy that humongous pavlova or whatever it is? You're taking a little bit of joy out, and you've got to be okay to say no to those things. But that's ultimately the challenge.
Yeah, no, it's funny you said about coping mechanisms and getting her. We're talking about training for the ultra before we started. That was definitely a cathartic experience. You know, what do we say? COVID, breaking up, lost my grandfather. Financially stressed, getting out of all those things. And I was just like, if I can roll out of bed and do what's on that little piece of paper that's 6 months long, if I can just keep going, like that was just like the thing. And
that can be the saving grace. Like for me, it was pretty much exactly the same, right? Separated from my ex-husband, everything around me was out of control. Yeah. And I had to control one thing. I was like, I have to control one thing and be okay. And that was the 5 o'clock alarm going off, mindlessly doing this plan, and then that gave me a sense of control before my world just became completely unpredictable at 6 o'clock. The kids woke up or whatever is going on. I was like, I've got to have an hour where I have some degree of control. Yeah,
no, it was very therapeutic, and it was funny coming down the hill. Absolute agony from being up on the Port Hills of Christchurch, coming down the hill. I was in the last 5Ks. And it was just like this wave of emotion came over and just bawled my eyes out running down this hill. And I was like, well, that was weird. And then, got to the finish line. Billy was there. I was like, wow. It was pretty special. Yeah. Yeah, and mum and dad as well. Yeah, no, it was a lot of release came with that. And, with my new girlfriend as well, it was just kind of like, that was kind of the mark in the sand of like, I need to get this done. Like, it's weird. I need to get this done for some reason. I'd love to work towards doing another one properly, like we said, without all the injuries and things. But that was a lot of, I need to get this done. You know, it wasn't 101, which would have been completely stupid, but it was still.
It was something.
It was something. Yeah.
And that's okay, because that's a process of self, coping and the mechanisms we use to adapt to whatever's going on. And now, for example, I know more about sleep and the cycles that your body undergoes throughout the night, and I don't get up at 6 anymore. Like, that's just a rule now. So not at 5. Sorry, I might get up at 6 at the very earliest. But I have a rule now, thankfully as well, that 6 o'clock is my hard line. I don't get up before then, even if I wake up at 1 o'clock and I'm like monkey mind, and I'd normally get up and just start working for the day. But I don't do that anymore.
Have you figured out your chronotype?
Yeah, she's a lion.
Sorry,
she'll be a lion.
A lion.
A lion?
Yeah.
Haven't heard of these chronotypes.
Oh, so Michael Bruce, so he's written, what's the book? It's all about chronotypes. So he talks about lions, bears, dolphins, and wolves. So a lion is a morning, what's it called? Early bird. Yeah. Sorry. So lions are kind of like an early bird, like to start early. Your bears kind of are the glue of society. They kind of keep everybody together.
Because they're that classic 9 to 5
classic 9 to
5 productivity window.
Yeah, and then your wolves are generally your kind of night owls, and then your dolphins are a bit of an anomaly. I don't know if I quite agree with his dolphins, to be honest, because I would actually say there's just circadian dysfunction. But yeah, so
how do they fit in?
They're like really just abstract, like real random hours in the night, which just doesn't make sense with evolution.
So maybe what Lex Freeman thinks he is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Classic coda, Yeah.
I think I'm a lion, but it's probably the adrenaline you spoke about before. I can then get into twilight and turn on again. So
yeah, that was one of the most painful things to kind of unwind for Rach, because she was just so ingrained with the productivity window, like myself. But yeah, it was the marriage of the data with the subjective. So subjectively, she thought she was prime time. But then when I was able to bring the data in to kind of prove
Is this for the evening?
No, this is for sleep in general. So really focusing on that, understanding her circadian rhythm. So, we had a bit of an experiment. We were like, okay, what happens if you do sleep to a reasonable time? What does that change? Because I'd previously done this with myself, and because I used to be the 5 a.m.er as well. That's when I would get my deepest block of work done. Obviously, when I was training for Ironman and all that, I had to squeeze time in, and I always wanted to work before I went training because otherwise I come back and I just can't think. So I would always block that window out. But what I learned the compromise of that is I wasn't getting my REM sleep. So my REM sleep is generally from about 5 a.m. to 6:30. So I get a good hour and a half within that block, hour and a half. And by not doing that, I'm sacrificing that. And that just, when you look at longevity, and the ability to process memories and, store them and, just general function, you need your REM sleep. That is extremely important. Not one sleep cycle is better than the other. They're all important, but the REM was just getting sacrificed day in, day out. So I, gave it the experiment. I was like, let's get some data.
Taking the Oura ring off, what have you noticed?
Taking the Oura ring off?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
So, if you didn't have data saying, you got these REM sleep, what have you noticed about your sleep?
Yeah, it's massively improved. I generally have a much better energy flow throughout the day. Don't crash as much. A lot more consistent.
Do you notice your dreams, or do you have more dreams?
Yeah, definitely.
Are they more intense dreams? What does that look
like? I want to understand the question better. So you're saying when you take off the Oura and it be more just your own, how are you feeling? And you sleep without the Oura and then you go from there? Is that what you mean?
No, so sort of. If it wasn't for Oura telling you, yes, you got this band of REM, what would be the intuitive metrics of a better REM? Yeah,
so REM is your emotional reset.
Yeah.
So you can think about when you get your REM sleep, you're emotionally sound.
And you feel that and notice that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Significantly. In particular, since my concussion. So post-concussion, REM was just decimated. So that was a big part of, why you're so short with people, when you got a concussion, you can't really
that emotionality.
The emotionality is just gone. So you're just like the switch. And that was a big thing to kind of retrain for me. So that was even more critical at that point. But I obviously went through this process about 5 years ago of getting my REM.
How were you measuring it back then?
So I wasn't measuring REM back then. I was focusing on the sleep transition at that point, going into a better time. I think I got my Oura ring about 3 years ago, so that's probably actually the period if I'm a bit more accurate.
But even then, it's hard with any type of diagnostic around assessing which sleep stage you're in, which is actually why yesterday we were really honoured to be able to be sent the Dream 3. Yeah. And of course that's one of the more clinically advanced wearables that will track your brainwaves. So we've had the Muse S for about a year now. That was one of the so when I went on the program, the executive health program, the Muse was one of the things that I got to be able to understand what was going on with my brainwaves. But compared to between the Muse S and the Dream 3 is more of the clinical space, so it's far more highly attuned to what the brainwaves are. So I think you wore it for the first time last night because, again, trying to assess true REM or true deep sleep, you can only do that through actually assessing brainwaves. And so that's what we're trying to learn more about.
Because generally when you got the Oura ring and the BioStrap or any kind of sleep wearable, they're indirectly measuring your sleep cycles, but the only true way to understand what sleep cycle you're in is to have tracking the brainwaves. So, for example, your deep wave sleep is kind of that delta. And if you're not getting that delta wave, you're not getting your glymphatic system working, therefore your garbage clearing system of your brain is not flushing everything out, so you're getting a build-up of beta amyloid, tau proteins, all these kind of things. These are the things we know are associated with... What's that?
GABA.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, which is a GABA period as well. So these are the things we know are associated with sleep cycles, and that's why it's important to understand. But
glutamate, not GABA. Yeah.
But the issue with General wearables is they're obviously not tracking the brainwaves, they're doing it indirectly. So we want to know how accurate they are, because obviously they've done the studies where they've compared it to EEGs and PSGs as well to see what the accuracy is. But I want to see what it's like subjectively as well. So biggest thing we're always trying to do is understand the importance and the power of the technology, and that's where the dream comes in, is to kind of start tracking the brain waves, and what I believe is a lot more comfortable approach to tracking sleep as well, better than going to the sleep clinic. That's one thing I love about the Aura. It doesn't impact your sleep in any way. You don't feel it. This version of the BioStrap we feel a little bit, because it's kind of a little bit taller. But they do have a new version coming out, which we're looking forward to testing out.
Have you tried Whoop as well?
Yeah, Whoop's the HRV is just like, I've seen them come out with 4.0 just recently, maybe yesterday. I was looking through that, but I'm still not impressed with what they've got. The miniaturizing it a little bit, but from all the research I've seen, not of the 4, I haven't seen the research around the 4 yet, but the previous models, is the HRV just doesn't compare. It's not accurate. So for me, the readiness score is an important element, and I'm not interested in if it doesn't track heart rate variability.
Yeah, and there's some interesting things around which sensor you're using, what type of infrared spectrum you're using, things like that, which will define the accuracy of. Yeah,
because it generally uses like a green light, which that's like the Apple Watch. It's that green light PPG, which is not a very accurate measure. So like Aura, BioStrap, they're using red, for example, so that's going to get a better frequency.
Which is interesting, because all of these wearables are coming out with sort of more improved optics sensors, whatever it might be. You've got to have your wits about you. We've been sent so many devices to test. It's starting to become very confusing, all the acronyms, might I add. Yeah. But what's fascinating is, again, the merging of the science with the human dance. Like if you're not wanting to wear it because it's not comfortable, or it gets stuck on sheets, or it blinds you in the middle of the night because it's moving on your arm, and it's like, Leah, red light just wakes you up. Like, little things that it's about human delight. I think that's where a lot of these companies miss the mark in trying to interface beautifully and delightfully with the human experience, while maintaining clinically relevant data sets. Much like the Palm Pilot to Apple, when there was plenty of touchscreens available with a little stylus for the longest time. It wasn't until you actually started to make, we've got your own little stylus here. Let's make that a little bit more user-friendly, interface. And so it's trying to close the gap between the human interfacing and the data that I think is the distinguishing factor. And so plenty of these new wearables are advancing, but again, I think they're looking too much into the data side only, and not the user experience and the behavioural elements around what you do with the data to make it powerful on a day-to-day perspective.
Yeah.
With the dream on your Instagram, you said that company's moving into clinical stuff.
So it has moved into clinical, yeah. So they're not really doing the.
So it's not going to be really a thing. Is that right?
Purely clinically, for clinical applications.
It's definitely a thing for clinical applications. So, like, for example, sleep studies, or for Project Otto, for example.
That's not really going to be something available to a consumer, or you still get?
Wow, through Project Otto, potentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it kind of... the reason they're doing that is it's not a cheap piece of tech. It's a very expensive piece of tech, because...
So it'd be like something that belongs to somebody, and they, instead of, like you say, going into a sleep lab, which is not a natural environment anyway, you here, take this home.
Yeah, exactly.
And bring, bit like wearing a halter.
Yeah, so it's... Yeah, there's a few variations in how they're doing with the clinical studies. So obviously with COVID, there's limitations around shareability of them as well. Yeah. So I think they through talking with them, they go to about 3 different people, as long as it's cleaned in between and all that. But yeah, generally you wear it for a certain period of time. Depends on the study and obviously the methodology around it all. But they were in the consumer market, but recently stripped that away to focus on the more clinical side. Oh yeah, here you go. Yeah. Because of the depth of data it provides. So
that's your new one, right?
Yeah, it's a new one. So that's the Dream 3.
Yeah.
And then we've got the Muse S there. So you can kind of see the differences between them.
That one's the top, I hope.
Yes.
There's not
Blinking light.
blinking light down on your face.
Herein lies, some of these things, which that they're beautifully made, and I take my head off to the design team
The
because it
green's
is
blinking, is it?
hard to do.
Not under sleep time. So
Thankfully, yeah.
the lights turn off. Yeah.
Once you're actually recording, the lights tend to turn off.
Just trying to find the phone right now.
Yeah.
Which is another question to kind of bring into it as well, as with Wi-Fi receiving, EMFs, and all that.
Yeah.
These are the big things we're looking into, the devices, and making sure that we're not overdoing it too much, because you got to have or you can put on Bluetooth, and same with BioStrap, and it's trying to find these elements where we can reduce these environmental toxins, because we know that's a carcinogen by the World Health Organization. It's a class 2B carcinogen, so we need to be extremely careful about that. And we're surrounded by it today, and we're going to be even more and more surrounded by it, so we need to be very careful.
So put things on airplane mode, you mean?
Yeah.
When you said catching on the sheets, we're drinking some ketones here. One of the things that fascinated me about the ketone is Verta Health, and it's interesting you're talking about sleep. How do you feel? What's going on? And the Verta Health method works by having the continuous glucose and ketone meter go to the phone, alert a health coach when those metrics are off, them calling them up and having a health coach conversation. Are you sick? What have you eaten? How are you feeling? What's work like? What's happening in your family? What's going on? What happened? And that data is extremely successful in reversing diabetes and cardiovascular risk factors. But back to the tech, which one was the best?
Oh yeah, because we obviously tested the two kind of market leaders. So we had the Dexcom.
That was a 5 or 6?
6 G6.
Oh,
yep.
yeah.
So we've actually got a sensor, I think, up there somewhere. So we had the G6 and then the Freestyle Libre. And both fascinating to kind of see the differences between the two. So you're getting a little bit more data set with the Dexcom. So it's taking readings, I believe, every 5 minutes versus the Freestyle Libre, which is every 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
In the Freestyle Libre, they've got 2 versions as well. They've got the clinical version, which will essentially just read and store. So the user won't see anything. So it could be powerful for a kind of clinical side. Then they have the ones that you have to tap. So every 8 hours you need to tap it to make sure you capture the data. With Dexcom, it's just a continuous stream.
Which is Wi-Fi enabled. So
it's talking to your phone.
Correct.
Yep. Yeah, so
it can offload its data.
Yep, so it can offload its data continuously.
Which can be a problem because if you don't have the correct syncing or if something's broken, it'll alert you, even if it's at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's been a couple of moments where it's just we turn that damn thing off. What's it waking us up?
Or camping as well when we got no reception and it's just so we got no data. So there's elements of
no data and an alert.
Yeah, and alerts. Yeah, the alerts are because obviously these are designed for diabetics, not designed for healthy individuals. So we're taking a technology that has been used in a completely different area into a new
healthy population.
So it's there's obviously kinks that need to be ironed out.
And it's all around body literacy too, really.
Yeah. Who's the female that won Ironman this year?
Which one? Which Ironman?
Tapua? Wells?
Hannah Wells? Did she win Ironman? Yeah, she probably did, yeah.
So she has an athlete.
Yeah, so I think she's with Super Sapiens. I think I've seen her using that, which is the Freestyle Libre.
Okay.
So they're just using Freestyle Libre technology and creating their own algorithm around it to support athletes.
Right. But I thought that was epic.
Yeah.
We did find the Freestyle Libre from a user experience perspective far more enjoyable than the Dexcom G6. So that was, it's also interesting around the waste. We even talk about the waste that's created from. Yeah. I said to my dad, who's a bit of an engineer, mechanical engineer, he likes to dabble. I was like, if you could find a way to simplify this device.
Was that click-ons?
Yeah, and then that's thrown.
Yeah.
One use.
Thrown away.
Yeah.
So much waste.
And the one other benefit of the Freestyle Libre versus the Dexcom is Dexcom's bigger unit. Versus it's just a little dot, which is much nicer to wear. I found
slimmer profile, more slippery,
and lasts longer too. Instead of 10 days, it was 14 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and how did you two compare?
Yeah, so generally, Rach would have a higher glycemic response than I would.
In clearance?
Yeah, in clearance, she would go up and crash probably a little bit more than me, where I was a bit more.
So you get a drop off as well?
I'd get a drop to below norm, yeah for some things.
For me, I was pretty flat line.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think, to be honest, I think that it was. I think that's an Apple Android. So we have in the household an Apple and Android debate. Like he's Android, I'm Apple. I don't have an Apple MacBook Pro or anything like that, but my phone is Apple.
Yeah.
And so, of course, how the graphs are displayed on the screen, I think it's a bit deceptive.
Oh no, it's the numbers though.
You had more spikes but it didn't look like they were as high as mine because mine expanded.
Oh no,
when you're
addressing the numbers though. So when you look at the numbers, there was like she was heading up into the would have a very high carbohydrate based meal, and she would head up to the 9s sometimes.
8 most of the time.
Yeah. Oh, there's to be a bit of variance in there, right? Like, but generally she would have a little bit more. But the difference with me versus Rach is I've been on this journey for a lot longer, right? So I've gone got the gut microbiome to a level in which can kind of handle a little bit more, and I've done a lot of the fat adaptation through Ironman, and so I think too often, this is what I liked about this EGM, is the individuality between it. Like, we're going to be different, but how different are we? How can we bring that closer?
And you think they can, this might be getting too finicky, but can come into your combined meal prep?
Well, I think that the thing we found out was if we follow a high carb load meal, precede a high carb meal with high fats, good fats, whatever it might be, even if it's an MCT shot, whatever it is, that the glycemic response was dulled. So, we learnt what things work well. So then, for example, if we want to have that blondie cake or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, let's have, a shot of MCT oil or perhaps some almond butter or something like that first to kind of help to dull that response. We also found that, for example, being in the spa right after a high carb meal made our blood sugar go a lot higher and stay up for a lot longer. At least that's what mine showed.
Have you come up with a mechanism on that?
Yeah, I did look into it. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head now.
So do you think you're getting a endogenous dump as well?
Yeah, so it's pretty much just your system. I think it's I don't want to stipulate on it. I can't remember off the top of my head. I did look into it at the time. But yeah, it's just a natural bodily response to stressor, right? So it's a hormetic stress, so your body's just responding to it. But yeah, I'm not going to stipulate on the mechanism off the top of my head right now because I can't quite remember it and I want to get it right.
Can you talk about your Coca-Cola journey? How it wasn't really on the meter, but you felt like shit.
Yeah. So yeah, like I put it out to social media. I was like, what do you guys want me to test? Like not many people have access to these technologies, so you might want me to test something for you, even though there's going to be an individuality to it. And is there foods that you guys want me to test? So Coke Zero was one of the things that came up. Because it's not supposed to have a glycemic response, which it didn't have a glycemic response in me. But I'm somebody that doesn't drink fizzy drink as well. So it was an interesting process, and the resistance I had to it was quite embarrassing. I remember getting it from the mobile just on Cambridge Road there. And I walked out to the road, and I just didn't even, I was obviously jumping into my tailored ute, and I was like,
with a Coke.
Yeah, with a Coke, and I felt so embarrassed. I was hiding it in my arm. I was like, it's quite ridiculous. The levels was I felt so unhealthy, going to the counter and everything. I never drink fizzy drink because there is no nutritional value in it whatsoever, unless you're in the back end of an Ironman. Then that's when I would drink Coke, was when I was in the back end of an Ironman. That was amazing then. But yeah, in general, I just don't touch the stuff. So yeah, massive resistance to having it. And then when I did have it, I didn't enjoy it either. It wasn't pleasant at the taste. And yeah, no glycemic response. But what I did find is it would have been nothing but 45 minutes in. I did a video afterwards. I just crashed. I just felt terrible. I did this process when we had our kids in the house as well, and I was they're like, oh, you're not looking so good, very good. Because it's interesting for them to learn, right? Because obviously when you go from not having something to having something, you're a lot more sensitive to it. And yeah, I got a headache about 45 minutes in, and then just energy just kept crashing, and I had to go for a nap. I was just exhausted and then after that nap I was craving sugar. Because obviously my body's got this intake of sugar, and it's I need some more sugar. So although that didn't give me a glycemic,
not sugar.
Yeah.
Your tongue, tastes the sweetness, and then your body expects the calories that come, and there's this disconnect. Yeah,
when there's that disconnect, so and this is what happens with most people that have these drinks, right? They go have their Coke Zero, and then they're like, oh, craving my
Yeah.
a biscuit or some chocolate, or it's that kind of mid-afternoon. They might have the Coke with lunchtime, and then around that 3 p.m. they're like, oh, I need something
donut.
sweet. Yeah,
Piece
and
of
then,
cake.
then they go and do that, and then that vicious cycle keeps persisting, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, like obviously, objectively, nothing happened. Subjectively, won't touch stuff.
Nice. I'd love to talk to you guys all day, but I know you've got another meeting.
Yeah, got another podcast.
Yeah.
We've probably got a little bit more time if there's anything else we want to cover.
Yeah. Or if you've got more time, I'll stay as long as you can stay.
But I'm actually quite curious. I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah.
So you've been with your little your reel of all of the people that you've been interviewing and on your podcast, and what do you feel like? Oh, this keeps coming up. Like when it comes to, I guess, lifestyle design and health and well-being and what people choose to do and how they become the product, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you find is a persistent and consistent theme of all the people you interview?
Like there's a little bit of self-selection going on, of course, because
Yeah.
I first select the guests and then I'm the one asking the questions, so it's my curiosity. And then I always finish with, well, not always, but initially I finish with that, what's the flow going on? And the reason why I ask that question is to get a lot of value out of it. And I think it's what you mentioned before there, Luke, about coming back to those fundamentals. And often things are, the 10-year overnight success. It's like incrementally doing the thing, trying to have practices or prompts or accountability to things to keep you on track, keep you incrementally growing, flowing, going down the river. The analogies are endless,
Yeah, the iceberg.
Yeah, iceberg resistance, like you're just trying to get on that path. And I think also, like you said, Rachel, with I'm going to do this, making a decision to do it is so powerful. And like then once the decision's made, then you can do it. And I look back at my own life and I don't know whether it was good or bad. I have moments where I go, I wish I'd never gone to university. But at 12 years old going, that looks freaking cool, I'm going to do that. How do I do that? Well, you do science and maths at school, you go to university and you do that. My journey wasn't straight, but having that was like, right, that's what I've got to do. And it just took a massive load off of everything. And yeah, there's something in the decision and then the process, like you said. And that's kind of, it's, a little bit over 200 people or episodes. That's kind of what keeps coming up.
Yeah, it's like that theme, right?
Yeah.
Where are you going and how do you break it down and get there?
Yeah, and it might just be age and stage, but I've started really thinking legacy, like really thinking time, how things are spent, our day-to-day, quarters, years, and it might be children, all the things. It's just, I think, legacy, what are you doing? How does it play out? What's your process? And I guess trusting it.
Yeah, there's a really cool thing I saw that there's this big board that has the number of days you're probably still going to be alive, a number of weeks.
Yeah, so that's my journaling, 33,000.
Yeah.
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 And so the other side of that is 86,400. Is how many seconds there are in the day.
Yeah.
So like the 33,000 for me is, the days they're clicking away, and that board's amazing because like if you're like me, you just turned 33, you're like wiping off so much of that board.
Yeah.
But then on the 86,400, there are so many seconds in the day. If that 1 second didn't go that good, you've got
the
more.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your legacy you want to leave?
It's improving people's lives. So why I do things is improving people's lives to help them see the world to the best of their ability. So I can narrow that down to what I do in the day or broaden it out. You can try and make impact with people that you meet and things like that. I can highlight people's journey in this podcast. I can touch on it from my personal experience, how I can mirror back what someone has in the podcast. And then so the podcast tagline is Life Less Ordinary. I can show there are other ways of doing things if you're struggling, or if you are on a nice path and in flow, what are the little elements of that person's life that you can take out? So
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you look at your life outside of just your lifespan. So as a part of Tailored Tech, we have a 500-year vision.
Wow.
And it's, to service our great grandchildren. And I have to make sure there's 4 of them in there. But it's one of those things where greed and some of the worst behaviors and traits of being human is exacerbated when it's all about scarcity and that you've only got one lifetime to enjoy. When you start to broaden out, and which many Indigenous cultures do, right? They have centuries that they plan out and different generations that they plan out. When you start to look at the picture where you're a part of a cog of a ginormous clock, but it's still a cog nonetheless. And then what can that cog do to give increase to another one, or to change the cogs in the way that actually hopefully creates a better outcome? And, when you think about in 500 years time, where we see, or where we want to make sure we take the universe, because we exist, is to a place where organic and inorganic intelligence can work and live symbiotically together. So if artificial or augmented intelligence exists, let's make sure it's this beautiful dance in relationship with organic intelligence, in the way that they each become better because both exists. And when you're trying to design new technology that has the foresight of this dance, this beautiful symphony together, how do you ensure organic creatures, in this case, for example, humans, are at a point where they can make really empowered decisions that outlasts their lifetimes, that is around being the ancestor we want to have in the future, and is able to lean upon technology in a way that makes them better, not worse. How do we curate that? And then equally, how do we build or birth a technology in a way that the placenta is has a foundational construct of understanding this relationship, of being a part of a bigger thing because it exists, and being a companion to another thing, another life form, birthing or creating the placenta that forms the AI, right? That is about that dance between the organic and the inorganic, is something that is going to be hopefully beautiful, and then how that impacts other carbon-based life forms. So we're making sure that, for example, that technology, when it does a lot of the simulations and such, can also be applied to animals that perhaps, for example, might be endangered species, or perhaps the rats or the chimpanzees that when we're doing drug trials, we don't have to expend their life because their life's still valuable. Like, how do we actually start to simulate that? A lot of the biological constructs and the engines into the digital space, which looks at health outcomes and more of a living hundreds of lifetimes, and what is the path of least resistance to our optimal health. Like, I know we haven't really touched on what we're doing at Tailored Tech with the digital twin, but we're really trying to leave a legacy that is more about honouring life, and then equally crafting a beautiful relationship between the inorganic and organic version.
Yeah, so it's like freeing them up, because I think the biggest thing that holds us back from really living our higher purpose is our health generally, because without a foundation in health, you have no performance. Therefore you can't have a high cognitive thought process, right? You can't think about climate change, you can't think about politics, you can't think about like COVID and all the kind of bigger things that the world needs to solve right now, that you're focusing on just getting by day to day. So if we can free people up to not, the health just happens, the health is guided and by a benevolent dictator, and it's there supporting them, guiding them in a healthy, honourable way, that they don't need to think about it. There's no second thought. That's just base. Then we can have a society in which really can extend into high purposes. So yeah, that's kind of what we're all about, I guess.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives us a 500-year vision. Part of that, we've got a 15-year business plan, and then our next project is the next 2 years, and it's
journey into the cell.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's about that you say benevolent dictator, which is always, again, language, benevolent companion. With the actual augmentation. So I know we've actually been talking about, this is a whole different conversation we've been having with bio sort of cultural shifts in countries, and we're reading a book that's talking about culture architecture and things like that, where we, it's saying some places have dictatorships and some are more democratic capitalism, and so we've been right in the middle of that. So I think that's where that's coming from.
I've mixed it up.
The languaging is very, very important. It was cool. You were talking there about the combination and sort of symbiotic relationship that we could have, and the beauty and the love. One of my favourite people to listen to is Lex Friedman, and on my way here, I was listening to him speak to, I think it's John Donaher, who's a Kiwi guy who's a very good jiu-jitsu coach in the States, and they were trying to talk about a robot that could beat a human in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And rather than Lex talking about chess and Go and Alpha Zero and things like that, John actually went into the history of it, and he brought up the beautiful fact that actually average chess players, in combined with Alpha Zero, can beat very good chess players. And that's what he said to Lex. He's like, I can't remember the name of the practitioner that he coaches, but I think that you could create a robot to beat him, but you couldn't create a cyborg, this fighter and robotic learned cyborg. Basically, you couldn't beat that. He said, it's the beauty, the symbiosis of the organic and the artificial, which will always win out. And that's what Lex is always talking about, his love for sport. He wants humans to love and see the beauty in robots. And it's just like,
his ultimate goal is to try to cure loneliness.
Yeah.
Right? So Dr. Friedman is, he's so passionate about this beautiful symbiosis, this dance, I think he calls it. And it's like, how do you overcome the human condition of loneliness through some really delicate interweaving of emotional intelligence and interrelationship with inorganic intelligence. And there's actually, funnily enough, we emailed him a couple of weeks ago to try to get him having conversations about what we're doing with Project Otto, because there's so many similarities and alignment sets with what we're trying to craft with what he's obviously also talking about and very passionate about. But the thing that really resonated with us during some of his podcasts was the discussion around human loneliness and again that delicate dance. So it'll be interesting to see with all these such magnificent minds that are really pioneering the thought leadership on what these relationships could look like, that we're seeing more of those people, and they've got more platforms to be able to discuss it at length. So we're in the right time and place.
Yeah, and speaking of 500 years, we might be alive. David Sinclair is another person that's about to start communicating. Yeah. Maybe being alive in 500 years. Yeah,
there's so much responsibility there, though, because, we're overpopulation, right? There's already overpopulation elements. And then if you're extending people's lifespans, then obviously that becomes an interesting conversation, which I know Dr. Sinclair had a whole chapter on about the responsibility of overpopulation and longevity. But what I'd like to challenge is health span, right? Not just lifespan. And I know it's been coined, it's very popular in this space, but how do you ensure that not only people live longer, but they're healthier for longer, and they equally have the body literacy and the purpose, like an understanding of their purpose to actually create something beautiful from their extended life, rather than just becoming more of a potential virus that we see, or parasite with some parasitic behavior that some humans exhibit, which we all kind of exhibit in some respects, where we consume natural resources for our own benefit and our own survival. How do we kind of start to knit that out of some of our behaviors and purpose-driven kind of approaches? Yeah,
because like David Sinclair talks about in his book, what if you're dictator or boss never left, so he's there for like 100 years, as your boss, like there's got to be a handing of the guard.
Well, we're already seeing that in the States. It's like healthy elderly people, I think it's Brett Weinstein, I never know which one's which, saying like, where are the adults in the room? Can the old people leave us alone so the adults in the room can start up? We've still got granddad here.
It's also not looking at the requalifying, Like we talk about how you requalify for your job. So at the end of the day, even with relationships, we've talked about it with our own relationship is, one of the biggest concerns around long-term relationships is you start becoming really complacent. We have our own real interesting protocols and ways in which we keep things alive and ignited, through date mornings and this cool black book that we've got that goes through certain questions every week. But the point being, it's trying to actually having that really open communication around reapplying. So are you still kind of, as sort of transactional as it feels, but you do it in a more a softer way. But, are your needs, your basic needs being met? Do you know what your needs are? Does the other person know what they are too? And then how are you ensuring that you're coming together to actually do this for life rather than just for convenience?
Yeah. No, Jimmy Hunt's coming up again. he was talking with he calls it wife, but they're not legally married. They had a ceremony. They've both been married, and they're husband and wife, but they're not legally married.
Oh, yes. Yep.
But, they sort of made the mantra that today they choose each other. And it was a nice conversation. It's titled "Should You Get Married," which is a can of worms, of course. But it's that consideration of like, that was a beautiful thing you just said there. Like, do I know what my needs are, and do you know what my needs are, and vice versa? And if we don't know it ourselves, how are we supposed to communicate that? And are we communicating it? Do you know? Do I know? And how can we work as a team?
Well, this is the whole product, right?
The product.
Like you ask someone to create a product, right? If it's on the tech world, obviously, as a tech product developer, if you say you want a product, but you have no requirements, right? So we use a Moscow principle: must have, should have, could have, won't have.
Right.
Moscow. That's the acronym you use often with product development, and it's like we are the byproduct of how we think, live, eat, move. If we don't know what are our Moscows, how do we make sure we create us as a product that we want? So what are the must-haves in my life? What are the should-haves? What are the could-haves? And what are the won't-haves? And what, how are you navigating, I'm not going to get this from the relationship, and that's okay, because I actually don't need that. It's a nice to have. But what are the hard must-haves that I need to communicate? And again, talking about health span and lifespan and leaders, all this is requiring this really interesting human construct around, again, real transparent communication around what do we want from our leaders, what do we want from our relationships. If you don't know what you actually want, how do you know you're going to get there?
Yeah, it's like testosterone, So do you want health vitality approach, or do you want the forever fasting approach?
Yeah.
I was having a discussion with my mate the other day about testosterone. He's in the middle of the normals, and he was like, well, what are the things that might be lowering? And I said, well, Andrew Huberman did a very good job on Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss of going into it.
Yep.
But on a lot of it is plastics. I know he has, he went through a phase of doing figure, and he has a bunch of Tupperware containers around the place, and he knows that doing the figure and losing all the weight and doing the crazy things wasn't that good. I said, well, there's some simple things, but the sleep and the movement, and it's a process. It's going to be on a road.
That's your REM, right? Like I think even I'm pretty sure Andrew Huberman's even discussed that as well. But actually no, that was with Why We Sleep.
Matthew Walker.
Matthew Walker talks about REM is when you're getting your testosterone, which you'd think it'd probably be more your kind of your delta wave, your slow wave, your deep sleep, but no, it's actually in your REM, which is you're getting your biggest testosterone boost. So again, if he's getting up too early, he might not be getting his testosterone. Yeah,
and that takes you back to the individuality, the chronology. Yeah.
Chronotype, yeah.
Chronotype.
I mean, that's the thing is where a lot of, some of the health influencers, thought leaders, take a more reductionist perspective. But the reality is so where precision healthcare and precision lifestyle design is far more appropriate for our species. Now, at the end of the day, like you mentioned before, humans from a biological perspective have very specific engines. And like all carbon-based life forms, they will work a certain way, and there will be, physics and fluid dynamics and activation energies and all these kind of mathematical elements.
He's an engineer, so you know.
Right. But the interesting part about that is, while we have core functionality as a part of just being a living, breathing, carbon-based life form, a lot of the mindset and lifestyle and influences all of that. And I think that's the often under-baked part of health is, and we're learning more about it, is the more you think that you are, the more you are, which seems so woo-woo.
Is that Lupton? No, who's Lipton? Bruce Lipton?
Not sure.
He's like an Upton, a Lipton, and a Lupton. I'm pretty sure both of them start with B as well. It's just like so confusing. But it's like
confusing.
If you can sort of think your mindset and create those sort of happy hormones, you can move your physiology a little bit that way as well.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's completely like the antithesis of what we're taught in some respects, or at least because we can't necessarily measure it very well around if I think this way, if I think and sit here and have my abundance meditations and all my things, which actually I know I've got a great YouTube video which is like Jumanji. It's an abundance meditation. It's like a Jumanji game. If you want some changes in your life, you want that YouTube video. I call it the Jumanji video, so we can perhaps put it in the show notes. But suffice to say, I think there's hopefully some new and exciting research around how these mindset practices truly change the biochemistry in your body and in what way.
Yeah.
But there's some really cool, innovative work being done in the neuroscience perspective to see how what you think actually is and does.
Yeah, but what we really need to see is a marriage of the data with the behavioral kind of psychology, because too many people just focusing in on the data. And they're really just, that's the scientists looking at the data, but they're not marrying the two together. So until we see people in that space of...
And this is to convince
because like
people
this...
come in, isn't it?
Yes, this is a big part
to adopt.
Well, not necessarily pull them into adopt, because you've got to be at that point of wanting to adopt. Like we can't force people to adopt, but capturing people where they're at. And then transferring them across, but understanding how to nudge them in that right direction. And this is the big thing we're doing with tailored technologies and tailored health and performance, because everyone is focusing on the data, but no one's really looking at the behavioral psychology. So part of what we're doing with tailored technologies is we're looking at funding PhDs into behavioral psychology, because if we can't help people make the changes, it doesn't matter if we have the best data in the world. We're not going to make the changes. So we need to take a step back from the data and actually look at the human and have a human-centric approach. So that's at the heart of everything we do, is really looking at the human first and then comparing that with the data so we can bring the two together.
Love it. Sure, wrap?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, guys.
No worries.
Beautiful home.
Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. And first time using 3 mics. It's
I
bloody
know.
cool.
That's awesome. So it sounds like it will be hopefully a future. You'll see more with 2 people on the show.
Yeah. No, as I was saying to you offline, going to the Seeker show, that's, people think it's 100 podcasts. It's not. It's just one of my interests. But yeah, I'll be at the Seeker show, so there will be a run of people that are hunters, but life less ordinaries. Not about boxing someone in. So it'll be good fun, and hopefully talk with a few more people and maybe get a 4th mic in there as well.
I know.
Seeing as there's a
got
hole.
the option. I know. Why not? I think the issue there is you're going to have 2 cameras.
Yeah.
Going kind of separate directions. So you
probably
get everybody
better cameras and laptops too.
Well, at least we cleaned off the lens.
Yeah. No,
that's a win there.
That's very nice. Takes a woman's touch sometimes.
Little things, man.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's get out of these headphones.
All right.
Cool.